And welcome back, one and all, to Get the Mic. I'm your host on the left, Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
and we're excited to come to you this Saturday with a special episode. Well, maybe specially timed episode, let's say.
An inconveniently timed but surprising live show.
Yes, we intend to actually produce a lot more content going forward, just so you all know.
Yeah, that may lead to us having some pre-recorded episodes. But I think that's going to be really helpful for us to stabilize a schedule.
At any rate, we welcome you back. If you viewed us before, if you haven't viewed us yet, please subscribe, hitting that button down below. Hit the bell icon to be notified of our new episodes.
Please like.
And please slam that like button. So today, as usual, we're going to be talking about Dragon Ball. However, we are starting a new arc, which is one of my favorite arcs that Dragon Ball has ever produced, that any piece of fiction has ever produced, and that is the Red Ribbon Army arc. So before we get started, anything you want to add? Anything you want to recap from before?
No, I think that I just want to preface talking about the Red Ribbon Army arc with me saying that it's hard to remember how much of it I really took for granted, Going into just kind of stepping into the arc, it's like, oh, wow. I remember the broad strokes, but all the things I discounted before seem to be important to what we're going to be talking about really soon, and it's going to be a wild ride.
Hell yeah, going to be a wild ride. So let's go ahead and get started, I suppose. So the first thing we see is Goku riding on the flying Nimbus, going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also see just the introduction of, maybe not the introduction. We hear the song, which I think you wanted to mention, right?
Oh yeah, well, it ties into what we were saying in the last episode that there's more discrepancies now between the original and the English dub. The presence of this song being a good example of it, where you're watching it in English and it's almost kind of like paced weird. It kind of feels odd just how little is happening with there not really being background music happening in that sense. And it's just kind of like, okay, like I'm just watching a montage. I'm just watching this montage. And I happened to switch the audio track back over to the Japanese, and I was like, oh, there's a whole song happening right now. That's why I'm getting these random
Yes, and I think
subtitles popping up. And
the
stuff.
spirit of it is more captured in the music of what happens in the original audio. However, we do see the introduction. We also see the very first scene, and this is something I want to point out specifically in this part, is the very first scene that we see of this arc is Commander Red lighting a cigar, smashing it with the cat, all of that.
And saying kill.
And saying die.
Die, yes.
What do you think about that?
I'm not sure yet. I have to decide what I think about that.
So it's a window into the glimpse of this arc's adversary, and it's a real adversarial spirit. And it's to distinctly cut a distinction between Pilaf and this new adversarial spirit.
Well, we're showing that this has teeth, whereas Pilaf was very much, he was that sort of toothless, adversarial, childish spirit. So we're immediately shown like, no.
Hello, John.
I'm not ruled by my pets, let's say, right?
Yes.
Hello, John. Welcome to the stream.
Welcome to the stream. So I'm not ruled by my pets.
Yeah. Not ruled by, you could say, your emotions, right? So the first thing we see is he's got the cat. It's a typical motif that you see with these villain archetypes, right? That you got the like Giovanni style mob boss sort of like, I have this pet that's always under my hand, it's always like under my palm. And I think that kind of ties into looking at what's happening with Pilaf, right? Where he's got this goofy relationship with like Shu and Mai, who are these
specifically
pieces.
Shu, because he is someone who should be subordinate to Pilaf, but oftentimes
Pilaf
overshadows
needs,
him in
yeah,
intellect and wit. It's like it's more of a disembodied uh ego piece because
hmm
he's unable to subordinate it to his will, which Commander Red is easily able to do with his cat, and
exactly.
smashes his cigar, which I also wanted to mention the cigar smoking and the smashing into the
Onto
Marilyn
the
Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. And so it's a show of the real adversarial spirit coming through as a distinction between the foolish adversary that is Pilaf before.
Which those two things are not. He doesn't have dominion over, right? Those aspects of himself.
Exactly. And so he can't actually be the adversarial spirit.
Not actualized.
Right. And then it goes into the intro and we see Goku in the song and all that, and we kind of establish our base level for where this episode is going.
hmm
And we also get introduced in the next scene to Pilaf's Castle in the Clouds.
Got a castle in the
And so
sky.
I am interested because you said you had some insight to this.
Okay, so this is my interpretation of Pilaf having a castle that goes with him where he goes, or you could say a palace. So there is the aspect of being trapped in the, let's say, the having mode rather than the being mode whenever you're in the palace. And you can see this in Buddhist mythology, where it's sort of, you need to leave the palace, go out of the place where you get to have, and you need to experience, to live out, to be in a mode of being, right? Pilaf can't do that. And that's ultimately what the conflict comes down to, the destruction of his palace in the last time we saw him, because it's the shadow erupting up out of it and destroying it, because the encounter with the hero is a huge opportunity for Pilaf to grow and to sort of develop as a spirit, but he doesn't. Instead of that, I think that him having this flying palace that follows him wherever he goes is a distillation of the idea that if you stay set in that way for long enough, it becomes part of who you are. Like, it's not a place that you go. You don't go just take refuge in your sort of palace having mode mindset. It becomes an aspect of you, and you take it everywhere that you go. And you almost need it to be there for you to be able to operate, because you don't have any strength of your own.
It's an interesting conception. Have you ever read or watched the? I guess have you ever read Les Mis?
No.
Les Miserables. So in that musical, there's a story about a castle on the clouds, right?
Mm.
And Fontine's daughter Cosette sings it when she's in the care of some unscrupulous inn owners, let's say. And it's interesting because that song is, you can translate the spirit of that song across time to what Pilaf has done here, which has made his dreams manifest, right? With the castle and the clouds. But it's only a, let's say, thin illusion, as we'll see in the next couple of episodes,
Yeah.
because
Well,
it's even less.
the thin illusion of the castle in the clouds is a motif that we see even in Dark Souls, right?
Yes. Which castle?
In Orlando. The
Oh, yes.
illusory castle in the clouds.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely. And so that's made manifest here. We also see that Pilaf is haunted by his past, as the Uzaru haunts his dreams, crushing him every time at night.
hmm
And he is more determined than ever to get the Dragon Balls, but he's also more embodying the foolish adversary.
More than ever before.
Exactly.
And I think that's really what's happened here, is he's really locked into that mode of being, and he's much weaker for it, right?
Right, and we see even Shu is able to embarrass him in strength of character, let's say.
I mean, the first thing we see is he's just lying on the ground with a shoe on his face. I mean, he's just pitiful. And then there's also the funny part where it's like, you feel like the scene starts like it's going to be the middle of the night or something, and he wakes up from a nightmare. And he's like, oh, he throws the curtains open and it's bright, right? He's asleep during the day.
he's he's kept himself in the dark.
Mm-hmm. He's
It's an interesting thing,
willfully
yeah.
staying in the dark, right?
Right. But I think that all combines to see where Pilaf is, and it's important to lay this groundwork because how he interacts with the characters going forward in these couple of episodes will indicate where everyone stands now on the hierarchy because we've transcended already.
Right. And we established this in the last episode how Goku is on a different level, and we're seeing that Pilaf really isn't.
He's not able to, no. But we do see Goku being blind in his own way here, swimming in the wisdom of the waters, let's say, basking in the enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And we also get introduced to the ground forces of what we've seen earlier in the episode of Commander Red's Red Ribbon Army. And so the introduction of them keeps Colonel Silver, who's the main antagonist of this very first mini arc, enshrouded, let's say shrouded visage.
Mm-hmm.
We also see Goku's clothes get stolen. As I said, he's blinded by that water.
Yeah, it's sort of the being blind to your nakedness idea with Goku's innocence, and I
Well,
think
it's also specific that he's naked, right?
yeah, well, he's his all of his vulnerabilities are, uh, how do I say, apparent. He is revealed for his vulnerability. Um, but also I think that a really bad example of this that's happened recently is what happens in the Green Knight, right? Where we see that the hero sets off, into the wild and is sort of he does the exact same thing, right? He i- in in being focused on his path and being focused on himself so much, he discounts the possibility that this could happen, right? And then he loses his possessions, it's taken from him, and it sort of is this whole process. And I think it's bad in the Green Knight. I think it's actually great how it goes down in this episode, where we see that Goku now has sort of dominion over his things. Like his possessions don't own him. He can call them to himself up on the Nimbus, right? So even whenever they're stolen, it's like he retains them. It's the momentary blindness of the hero is something that Goku can easily overcome now.
Yes. Although I will say perhaps his boon from Bluma is not.
Right.
Because what gets taken is the Dragon Radar, exactly something that he has not embodied and something he's really relied on Bluma for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Noibo he's mastered, even the Keen Tone he's mastered, right? And he's mastered Roshi's training, and wearing the gi of Roshi, right, is kind of an embodiment of that even still.
Well, yeah, it's clothing yourself that way. It's sort of I'm going to act out this mode of being in the world now, outside of the dojo, outside of the sacred space, right? I'm going to take it into the sort of the real world and try to be a representative of, to align with that pattern. And so to lose that is essentially to lose that mode of being, and not in a literal sense, but it's something that Goku he's not going to lose from this.
But it's actually contrasted well with kind of what happened with the rest of the Dragon crew last episode and how they struggled
Mm-hmm.
to maintain control over their ancestral gifts, whereas Goku is easily able to get those back, which he's owned, let's say, just not those that he hasn't necessarily mastered.
Well, we see literally what happened with them was they lost them, and then they just plopped down in the desert and sat there. They were like, "Oh no, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to fix the situation. It's just I lost it." And then they just get blown back. Goku immediately just calls it back to himself.
Yes. And so he runs after the thief who stole the radar. And that's kind of the next thing that happens in this introduction. We get to see maybe kind of a roguish archetype, right? He's stealing so he can eat. So you can kind of understand the let's say, impetus for his crime, but he's still committing a crime.
Yes. He's aware of what he's doing.
And so the next thing that happens is we see Pilaf and Mai roaming the town, and they say, "What are we doing here? Walking around aimlessly," something like that. Like, they really have no clue what they're doing. They're not conscious to even the mode of being they should be adopting to pursue the Dragon Balls at this point.
They're just stumbling along,
Which is
trying
kind of what
to make this
happens
into something.
when the castle of ego built around Pilaf has crumbled to the ground, right? And he has no basis. His castle in the clouds has nothing underneath it, right? It's
Well,
not
the thing about
supported by anything.
I was gonna say the thing about it's very similar to a castle in the desert. You don't have a kingdom, right? Neither of his castles have been able to actually be rooted in a kingdom to have some earthly like representation, right? It's all projected ego.
And
it's
so,
hypothetical.
and especially when he gets on the ground, he really doesn't know anything. He's
Yeah.
completely ignorant to the world around him. And so he's trying to find the Dragon Ball. Goku's also going to the same town with the Dragon Ball. And this thief is trying to sell the radar so he can eat something.
And then we're introduced also into this shopkeep who
Are we?
I guess he's like
at that point? Let's go to
No, I guess it doesn't roll that far.
Go ahead.
Well, the first thing that happens is we're introduced into the pawnbroker, right? Who's going back and forth with the kid and trying to rip him off. Do we see that before we see Red roll into town?
That's
trying to remember
silver,
the ordering.
But yeah.
I mean silver, red.
I don't think we see it yet, no.
No, okay.
So the next, we don't need the pawnbroker yet.
Well, so we generally just see the setup then to what we're going to roll into here, which is that...
Yeah, we've had all of our plot lines aligned to meet in this town.
Right. And it's converging now with the Red Ribbon Army rolling in on their mission to get the Dragon Balls.
And so they clear this place pretty brutally, and I think the Red Ribbon Army, as of so far, has shown tactics akin to something Brok was talking about. I think he wants to add his analysis here.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
What you commented earlier on the...
Oh, along the lines of Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting to me that mode of being where it's sort of... You can think about the way that the Nazis adopted the swastika, right? And there was this sort of proclamation that, like, we as a united people are a representation of the self. Like, we're the Ubermensch, right? And there's this, like, the idea of pursuing the Dragon Balls, but for the sake of, like, a totalitarian force, you know, for the pursuing them for the wrong reason, right? And you can say trying to empower the self for the sake of empowering the self, and also for a selfish goal. You can do it that way.
It's a little more complex than that, I think.
I know that's a low resolution way of putting it.
It's a quite low resolution way of putting it, because, I mean, even what we see here, even though they are, let's say, authoritarian or tyrannical in the methods by which they go about it, right? Red has awoken a spirit in these men that is beyond what Red even comprehends, and we're going to get to that eventually.
Well, I think that'll be an interesting continuation of that idea.
Right, and I want to mention it here in the very first episode, and we'll mention it probably in the third or second to last episode as well. But right, this spirit that has embodied that is embodied by these soldiers, right, is a malevolent, materialistic spirit that is using the hierarchy in order to gain further power. And so immediately they challenge all hierarchies that oppose them. Families obviously are an extrapolation of hierarchies. They defeat the father easily and search the place and find no Dragon Ball.
I think that's a really good way of putting defeating the family, right?
Yes. That's the first thing they do.
And
it's important
I didn't really consider it that way, but yeah, I mean, that's what the authoritarian sort of totalitarian spirit does, is it immediately tries to say that it's superordinate to whatever hierarchy you consider to be ideal, right?
Mhm.
Or to be most important to you. It's like we're more important. We transcend that, and that's what you see in totalitarian regimes
But it's also
time and time again.
foreshadowing for what we're going to see in the next couple of episodes and how the union between man and woman in the making of family is subjugated, or not, maybe not subjugated, but it's challenged by this idea of authoritarian hierarchy.
Yeah, definitely,
So
absolutely.
now we're getting to it.
Yeah, we're getting into it.
And so Red Ribbon is introduced in this way, and I think it's very poignant that they are in that fashion. And so then we see Pilaf and the gang, and they meet this merchant, and the merchant also buys the dragon radar off the thief.
Right. I think the first thing that we see of the merchant is him haggling with the thief and basically ripping him off. Yeah, we're seeing it here. Um, we see his internal uh, dialogue with himself, you could say, and he shows that he knows exactly what he's doing here and that it must be worth a lot. And so he fakes the kid out, and the kid, being blind in his ways, just takes what he can get and leaves.
Well, he's unaware, right? He
Hmm.
is ignorant to the worth of what he's found. He doesn't, and this is actually an excellent symbol for what happens if people aren't aware of the opportunities that present themselves in front of them.
Hmm.
And there are many people who pass by opportunities they don't even know that are there because they are unable to recognize the value in the path before them.
Well, it's sort of like, what do you do with stolen property? Does it serve you, or does it act as your undoing, right? Which you could say that people who live that lifestyle, who steal what they have, don't appreciate what they have. They haven't earned it, and so they let those things own them and destroy them. And in that sense too, that blindness to the value of the thing.
But don't you think that's exactly what's embodied in an older version of the thief within the pawnbroker?
Well, yeah, it's cyclical, right? It's it's like a trickling down of that spirit.
Yeah.
He's enabling that spirit to continue.
You mean the pawnbroker's
Yeah.
enabling it?
Well, the pawnbroker is enabling that spirit to continue through the kid, right?
Right. Well, I mean, we're going to see by the end of this episode how that spirit manifests and transpires in the world. So we see him trade that, and we see Pilaf approach the pawnbroker, who also tries to trick Pilaf. And how does that go?
It goes pretty well. He reads Pilaf like a book and knows exactly what he wants to hear, right? It's sort of it plays into what you were saying earlier, where Pilaf is so blind to being on the ground, right? He has no idea when someone's manipulating him.
He's very much embodying the foolish adversary. Would you agree?
He has no self-awareness. Yeah, he's projecting this image
He
outwardly and he
wants this
doesn't know
personal
why.
gain. He wants the Dragon Ball. He wants to rule, but he doesn't actually have the malevolence, right?
Mhm.
Has Pilaf actually killed anyone as far as we've seen?
No.
No.
He just tortures himself.
Yes. And so when he gets the Dragon Ball, he announces his here. It's a good omen. We're going to find all of them, right? He's optimistic about it, but it's only because he's blind to the threats around him.
Well, he's also just completely manipulated by the flattery that he gives him. He's saying like, "Oh, I can see that you're a man of wealth, and you're
And
deserving of the great
he
crown."
gives a lot of his money to the pawnbroker here for this Dragon Ball, which we don't know yet, but we'll see what it really is in just a minute. And we also see Goku start to oh, sorry, not start to. Goku catches the thief,
Hmm.
and the thief reveals that he sold the radar to the pawnbroker. So Goku goes back and finds the pawnbroker to get back the dragon radar.
Well, I do want to point out the way that Goku found the thief was he's able to sniff him out because he smells so bad. He finds his scent to be repulsive, you could say, right? And so it is the thief's repulsiveness that is his tell.
Well, it's also that idea that the character you exhibit will be manifest in physical ways in these kinds of stories, right? Like, let's say Pinocchio's nose growing when he lies is the same kind of reason why the thief smells bad.
Well, it's similar to Bacterian, right?
Mhm.
It's that he's acting in a way that is not conducive to society, and he's right there on the edge of a society, right? You can see he kind of like wanders into the town and gets what he needs and immediately leaves the town again. So he's sort of like he's manifesting that in his behavior and in the fact that he's that mode of being is willfully repulsive, right? And that the hero can recognize that from a long ways away. It's very apparent to the hero.
Mhm.
It's like a paladin detecting evil in a sense, but not literally evil. Obviously, these characters are on not on the evil scale, but it's like it's recognizable to the hero in that sense.
Right, and so Goku gets that information. He goes to the antique shop where the pawnbroker is, and who does he find there? But Pilaf. And I knew it was gonna do it. I knew it was gonna show this one. So
This is it's such a funny scene where
they kind of just run into each other randomly, and it's actually not a random event, right? To run into this, let's say, corrupted materialistic mode of being that subjugates the moral good and evil for gain, personal gain, no matter the spiritual loss.
and looking at it in a psychological sense, it's sort of Goku time and time again is a representation of the conscience or the self manifesting itself to the character who's willfully not walking the path, right? So you can see here, it's like, Pilaf, you don't deserve what you have here. The spirit of the hero is manifesting itself in your mind. You have to escape. Run back up into the clouds, into your ego dome, and protect yourself from the voice of Goku, right?
And he can do nothing else but that, right?
Yeah.
Like what else is he going to be able to do? And so he does get back into his castle that has no foundation,
hmm
and Goku chases after him on the Kintone.
So I think it's funny too. The last we saw, he was fighting Goku in a plane, right? And we talked about how he he tried to use the Logos against Goku and just couldn't do it. He couldn't have that elevated position against even Uzeru Goku, right? And this is not Uzeru Goku that's coming after him. This is Goku on the path.
Yeah, and Goku on the path is easily able to overcome the spirit in which Pilaf is exhibiting.
hmm
But I think the last thing and the last important thing we see before we can kind of wrap up this episode, which we went pretty quick this time, um, even though there's a lot to say here, I think we just kind of nailed it.
Yeah.
The last thing though that we see that's important here is how the sight of the ideologically possessed Red Ribbon Army's Colonel Silver is able to see through the illusion of the materialistic worldview that offers glass Dragon Balls instead of the real thing, can see through the illusion of value in that way.
hmm Yeah, there you can say that Colonel Silver here, his eyes are much more open to the reality that's in front of him than Pilaf could ever be, right? Because Pilaf is all hypothetical, right? He's all a projected image. It's all outward, but there's no substance to him, you know? And so hierarchically speaking, it's like you got Pilaf who claims to be who Red is, right? He thinks he is, but he's not. And now we're seeing that just one general underneath
Not even a
Red,
general. He's only a colonel.
or just a colonel, yeah, underneath him
Is so much higher
is
on the adversarial hierarchy than
higher
Pilaf
than
could be.
Pilaf.
But
in all of his ego could manifest.
But
in the
it
world.
has to be Pilaf that introduces the Red Ribbon Army's power, let's say, because the foolish adversary precedes the adversary,
the true
just as
spirit of the
Oolong
adversary.
preceded Goku as the hero
Oh,
in
yeah.
in the first
Well, that's
arc.
why we'll get back to this. Why he does some other stuff that precedes even more mythological adversarial spirits.
Definitely. But here, so we see Colonel Silver approach the pawnbroker. He offers him the same Dragon Ball. Colonel Silver immediately recognizes it as a false representation of value, that value and that creating order from chaos that leads you to the enlightenment of the stars and the ball, all of that stuff. Colonel Silver knows that this is not authentic.
Yeah, and we're seeing here Goku has mapped out what's happening, and at the exact same time that he maps out that that's not a real Dragon Ball that Pilaf has, Pilaf drops the ball and it shatters. Right.
It's almost the cat is out of the bag moment, right? All important consciousnesses are aware of the fabrication of the value of this particular Dragon Ball.
But yeah, I mean, that's what I mean when I say that Goku is sort of acting as this conscience, right? He's acting as a piece of Pilaf that he can't
It's
escape.
also to say the deception, right? We see the deception further encountered by Goku righteously and forthrightly, and it's able to shatter the ball, like you said.
It shatters Pilaf's self-deception, right?
Yes. And that's all Pilaf is. And as we see in these the next embodiment Pilaf will do is another bit of deception.
Yeah.
And we'll see that next episode. But I think we're ready to wrap up. I think that was a very succinct episode we produced there, even though we had few viewers.
Yeah, we kind of sprinted through it, but I don't feel like we were rushing any of our topics. So,
well, I do want to be terse, but I think we just kind of flowed because I kept just loading up the next set of clips as we naturally got there. So
yeah.
If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe, please like. This is Get the Mic, the podcast where we dissect fiction in a mythological way. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
Good night, everyone.